Over the course of 2020 and going into the future of 2021, we have seen conventions either be forced to transition online or close their doors until the state of the world improves. There's a lot of furry cons, with over 100 unique ones taking shape over the last 30 years. During the Furry Renaissance, there was for a long time only one to speak of, the first of its kind, and a landmark name for furries everywhere. I have made a video on this topic before, but this video addresses many of the issues from the predecessor and goes much more in depth. Hello furs from the web, my name is Scar, and this is the story of ConFurence Definitive Edition. Stay tuned. Back in the golden age of the fandom, furry was a much more localized phenomenon. The earliest known collected groups of the fandom rose on the West Coast. Furries began to meet at conventions and started a small community of creative works. At different cons, specifically WesterCon and San Diego Comic-Con, room parties became a more official way to celebrate the fascination for anthropomorphism. July 1985 saw the birth of the Prancing Skilltaire, hosted by Mark Merlino and Rod O'Reilly. These two were also founders of the Cartoon Fantasy organization. The C/FO was originally built around animation fans, but some of the members would find their way into the new furry fandom. The Prancing Skilltaire was the first furry room party, and it was fitting given both its future and the future of its founders. Over time, the Prancing Skilltaire would find new life as a monthly house party ran out of the residence of Mark Merlino and Rod O'Reilly. This party is still ongoing, being held monthly. As for the founders, they went on to create the first furry convention. Based out of Costa Mesa, California, ConFurence Zero would serve as a testbed for a long-running convention, which would set the bar for future cons to follow in its wake. 65 attendees showed up on January 21st and January 22nd. During the Protocon, panels were held for the attendees, and a small dealer's den offered a few artists a way to sell their work. Also featured was a screening of Animal Olympics, a panel about zooting, and an art auction that raised $1,100. Even from the start, furries were a charitable bunch. ConFurence would double its attendance count the following year with its first proper inception, and only continue its growth throughout the Furry Renaissance. The early days of the online fandom no doubt helped facilitate its growth. ConFurence became a massive success throughout the 1990s, growing every year onward by over 100 attendees. The convention was popular enough that others would begin to rise around the country and internationally. The famous Anthrocon began life as Albany Anthrocon in 1997. Eurofurence, Europe's largest furcon, began in 1995. ConFurence even had an infamous unofficial East chapter that lasted 4 years, beginning life as Furtasticon in 1994. ConFurence had a major influence on the growing fandom. Therefore, many things to happen at the con would spawn discussion both inside the community and out. It was a massive stepping stone for the fandom, and breathed a sense of freedom after breaking away from the larger Comic-Cons. The atmosphere at ConFurence as the years went on became a controversial one. The ConFurence rumor mill was a nasty machine, and it's hard to accept sometimes what is fact and what is fiction. While not quite the same thing that the fandom is faced with today, parts of the fandom were divided. The fan versus lifestyler debate and the many attempts to forcefully create a safer work fandom were rampant throughout the Renaissance. The fandom politics likely interwove with some of the culture in reaction to the culture. ConFurence's art show became a reoccurring event, allowing attendees to bid on and purchase works created by artists in the community. The panel count increased significantly each year, talking about furry characters, the growing art of suiting, the new online environments populating the fandom, and so much more. Fursuit dances and contests both became prime events as well, giving just a bit more motivation for people to start creating their own costumes. There were controversial additions to the programming, such as the Cabaret Furla dance, which became a staple after its introduction in ConFurence 3. This performance saw costumers providing dances that were sometimes erotic or sexual to attendees. It ranged from belly dancing to ballet, sword dancing, and more. As expected, the event was age-restricted, but still did receive a level of criticism from parts of the community. The slave auction, later renamed the pet auction, was an event where customers could go and quote-unquote bid for cuddles. Essentially, the highest payer would earn a certain amount of affectionate time with the suitor or cosplayer. While it probably didn't go much further than that, from first glance it can look a little suspicious.
The guidelines are being sold. Basically, you become the property of the person buying you. They cannot do anything which is basically prohibited by law, state, local, federal, etc. They have you until basically, we'll say midnight tonight. Unless the slave decides extra.
Both events were actually carryovers from similar virtual incarnations over on Furry Muck. Both events, despite how controversial they may have been, did have a silver lining. Both were charity events designed to raise money for different groups. At ConFurence 3, the show was created by a single woman performer who took on the role of Omaha the Cat Dancer. This character was the star of a comic series after debuting in the Voodoo APA during the golden age of furry fandom. The creator of the comic, Reed Waller, was undergoing cancer treatment, which the performer helped to raise money to fund. Waller's character came alive so that it could pretty much save his life. Thankfully, he did survive, and the cabaret furry dance became a staple for future conferences. There's a lot to talk about what happened over the years at ConFurence. The atmosphere has been described as unrestrained and chaotic even. There were many comments on Alt.fan.furry that cite annoyances with behavior at the con. ConFurence 8 in a couple different ways seemed to be the tipping point, with rumors of a few incidents spreading on the bulletin boards and throughout circles. Over the years, the atmosphere has been building up to how it was seen in 1997. At ConFurence 7, there were reports of a man donning nothing but Dixie cups to preserve his modesty. The rumor was debated about on the bulletin boards, with some people saying it was instead a furry G-string fashioned to look like a sheath. Discussion on one of the threads talked about this rumor, clearing up that it had occurred during the cabaret furry dance. A few users, including one by the name of Fitchdons, addresses this rumor. He states that he heard it was during the adults-only section of the event, and he says just because it happened didn't mean that the guy was walking around the hotel in such attire. One of the other rumors that came around was semen found in the elevators. The worst of the rumors was probably the ones of sex in the halls, which had been debated extensively. There is no proof, at least that has survived the test of time. Fitchdons details situations he's seen of couples getting all lovey-dovey in public parts of the hotel, but nothing that would go as far as to fit the rumor. Like many situations today, ConFurence was just plagued by drama that left the convention in a fuzzy place for many people. There has been a lot of pushback over the founders and the convention itself. An interesting but very biased piece on the matter was posted on r/drama on Reddit. A retrospective by Snallygaster as to the day the furry fandom died. In this very over-the-top post, Snallygaster puts forth the idea that Merlina wanted to inject furry with a sexual element and used ConFurence as a courier for such acts. There were conflicting stories over how the convention was handled, but this is honestly flat out unlikely. ConFurence definitely had some adult aspects to the convention, more than some of the larger cons you will find today, but the rumor mill painted a more radical picture than is realistically plausible. The convention's atmosphere did not help, though, when the media would find their way into the con. This report was one of the first times furry would appear in the news, and acted as a sign of future problems to come. ConFurence 8, for all of its controversy, would unfortunately become the turning point for the convention, and begin the road unto its eventual death. In the last few years before Y2K, multiple other conventions would begin rising across the nation and around the world. Albany Anthrocon, Conifer Northwest, ZonyCon, Feral, Further Confusion, Midfur, Method Fur Meet, and Eurofurence would all open in the years leading up to Y2K and ended the moment where ConFurence was the con on top of the furry world. Furries had more regional options and didn't need to cross the country in order to attend a FurCon. Rod O'Reilly made the decision to transfer the con's venue up north to San Diego, and pushing from January into April. The fandom that had grown around the Southern Cali area suddenly needed to travel a much greater distance in order to attend the con. Two furries, Mitro and Whitefire, started up a new con in the region after the announcement, leading to the birth of Further Confusion. Combined with the steadily rising price and the somewhat sour reputation of the con, attendance began to drop in the years following after ConFurence 8. The last nail in the coffin came when Mark Merlino announced his resignation from the chairman position at the end of ConFurence 10 in 2000. Daryl Exline was voted into the head by the remaining staff and purchased the rights to the ConFurence name for a total of $1 US. Daryl Exline restructured the administration to form the ConFurence group. The administration oversaw ZonyCon, CritterCon Diego, and ConFurence, which was relocated to Burbank. ConFurence would run for 3 more years before the attendance fell below 500 in 2003, and the convention subsequently died. ConFurence died in 2003, following a sharp decline in its population. Many other conventions had arrived in its wake, and its influence remained in the community. Califur would form the year after in Southern Cali, taking up many of the traditions of its predecessor. The slave auction, renamed the pet auction, and the cabaret for Le Dance continued to reappear in the programming. Fennec, the organizers of the new convention, also brought in Merlino and O'Reilly to help get the con on its feet. Califur would run for many years, although being forced to go on hiatus in 2017. The con hasn't returned since, and it's unclear where its future lies, especially given the last couple of years. But that's a story for another day. And here we are. 2021 is here, and with it, so many different plans. Releasing later this month will be a review of Ash Coyote's The Fandom documentary. Next month, the awaited history of Scar the Fur will be on the table to celebrate the milestones my channel has hit lately. If you guys want to support what I do here or on my other channel, I have a Patreon linked below. Join my Discord if you want to stay in the know and talk to me. Until next time, guys, stay tuned.